Imagine this for 1 second. No cement, no bricks from a factory, no machines, no YouTube tutorials, not even a measuring tape. And yet a poor medieval peasant looks at an empty piece of land and says, Yahin mera ga kara hoga. And if you skip this story right now, you'll miss how humans once built homes with literally nothing but mud, wood, sweat, and survival instinct. Because medieval peasant houses were not cute cottages. They were life-or-death machines designed to fight cold, hunger, animals, and even other humans. And here's the twist most people never tell you. These homes were smarter than many modern houses. So let's start from zero, absolute zero, where a peasant begins by choosing land. Not randomly, never randomly. He looks for slightly raised ground so rainwater won't flood the floor, close enough to fields to save energy, but not too close to forests where wolves and bandits hide. Then comes the first shocking move. He doesn't build walls first. He builds the floor, scraping soil, stamping it hard with feet, mixing clay, straw, sometimes animal dung, because this creates insulation and kills insects. Yes, dung. Disgusting but genius. And before you judge, remember this floor keeps heat in winter and cool in summer. Now the real suspense begins because walls are not stone castles. They're wattle and daub, but a wooden skeleton made from thin branches woven like a basket, flexible, cheap and strong, then covered with wet mud mixed with straw that dries into a rock-hard surface. And here's the question, why straw? Because straw stops cracking, absorbs stress, and adds insulation, something modern builders rediscovered centuries later. And just when you think it's done, the peasant waits. Days pass. Rain threatens everything. One bad storm and the walls could melt. But this is where experience saves him. He adds lime or ash if available, sealing the surface, making it water-resistant. Now the roof. This is where survival truly hangs by a thread. Because without a proper roof, winter will kill you. So peasants use thatch, thick bundles of straw or reeds layered so rain slides off like armor, sometimes half a meter thick. And here's a wild fact. A good thatched roof can last 30 to 40 years and insulate better than modern roofing. Now pause and imagine the tension because there's no chimney yet. Smoke will fill the house. Eyes burning, lungs choking. But peasants don't panic. They design a smoke hole or let smoke seep slowly through the thatch, which coats the roof in soot, killing insects and preserving the straw. Accidental genius. Now comes the emotional beat nobody talks about. The house is shared with animals. Yes, cows, goats, chickens, inside the same structure. Because animals produce heat. Warmth equals survival. And suddenly that dirty medieval hut becomes a living heating system. Now you might ask, where's privacy? There is none. One room, one fire, one family, sometimes 10 people sleeping head to toe because space equals heat retention. Now here's the twist. These homes are fast. A skilled peasant community can raise one in days. Neighbors help because tomorrow they'll need help too. Community is the real cement, and then comes the final layer, maintenance, because these homes are alive. Every year walls are redaubed, roofs repaired, floors repacked, neglect equals death, and this constant rebuilding teaches skills passed down without books, without schools, pure oral engineering. And now the big reveal. The payoff most people never realize. Medieval peasants weren't primitive. They were optimized for their world, low resources, harsh climate, zero safety net. And many of their techniques, earthen floors, natural insulation, passive heating, are now copied by modern eco-homes, meaning the people we call backward understood sustainability better than we do. And if you think this is just history, ask yourself this. If electricity vanished tomorrow, if cement trucks stopped coming, if modern systems collapsed, could you build a home from scratch? Or would you freeze? Because medieval peasants could. And that knowledge almost disappeared. But now you know. And that's why skipping this story would have cost you something far more valuable than views. It would have cost you perspective. Now here's part 2. And this is where the story gets even more intense. Because once the medieval peasant's house is standing, the real battle begins. Not against weather, but against time itself. Because these homes were never meant to be finished. They were meant to survive, evolve, and adapt. And if you think building was the hard part, maintenance was the real test of intelligence, because every crack in the wall was a warning, every drip from the roof was a future disaster. So peasants developed a sixth sense for their homes, touching walls, smelling dampness, listening to the sound of wind. And here's the first twist. Windows were tiny on purpose, not because they didn't like light, but because light steals heat, so a small opening meant warmth stayed inside. And glass was rare, so animal skin, cloth, or wooden shutters controlled airflow like primitive climate control. Now imagine winter nights, snow outside, fire barely alive, and the house working like a sealed shell. Then comes summer, and suddenly the same thick walls keep heat out, making the inside cooler than outside. Passive temperature control centuries before electricity. And here's where curiosity spikes. How did they store food without fridges? The answer is brutal and brilliant. Pits dug under floors, cool, dark, oxygen poor, perfect for grain, roots, even meat wrapped in fat. And suddenly the house isn't just shelter, it's a survival system. But now danger enters the story. Fire, the biggest enemy, because one spark could erase everything. So peasants kept floors bare, earth, no. Wood near flames, water always nearby, and smoke-stained roofs that resisted burning better than dry straw. Risk managed through habit, not rules. Now the emotional beat hits hard, because when famine came, when crops failed, the house became the last line of defense. Walls patched tighter, animals kept closer, families sleeping even nearer, sharing breath, sharing warmth, sharing fear. And here's the twist. Nobody expects. These homes shaped behavior. People spoke less, moved less, conserved energy, because the house taught them how to live. And now jump forward years, storms hit, roofs sag, walls crack. But instead of abandoning the home, they repair it. Again and again, because land is life, and rebuilding teaches resilience, not dependency. Now the payoff starts forming. Modern houses promise comfort but demand systems, power, fuel, money, while medieval homes demanded skill and awareness. And here's the final reveal that flips everything you thought you knew. These peasants weren't just building houses, they were building independence. Every beam cut, every wall patched meant less reliance on kings, lords, or markets. And that knowledge was dangerous, which is why it slowly disappeared, replaced by centralized materials and controlled labor. And now ask yourself this final question. When disaster hits, when systems fail, which home survives longer, the one that needs everything, or the one built from almost nothing? Because medieval peasants already answered that question centuries ago. And that's why this story doesn't belong in the past, it belongs in the future. Part 3 is where everything comes together, because now we stop looking at the house as mud and straw and start seeing it as power. And this is the moment most history books stay silent about, because once a peasant mastered home building, he crossed an invisible line from dependent to dangerous. Because knowledge is harder to control than land, and here's the hook you shouldn't skip. A man who can build shelter with his own hands cannot be easily broken, and medieval rulers knew this, which is why skills were taxed, restricted, and slowly pushed into guilds and permissions. But peasants kept learning anyway, quietly, from father to son, mother to daughter, because survival doesn't wait for approval. And here comes the first twist. These homes shaped social rules. Marriages happened earlier because a couple that could build a house could start life immediately. No loans, no landlords, no decades of waiting, just skill and sweat. And suddenly, housing wasn't a dream. It was a decision. Now think about that contrast, and let the discomfort sink in, because today people work half their lives just to afford walls they don't understand. Now the emotional beat deepens. Children grew up inside construction, watching walls repaired, roofs relayered, learning physics without formulas, engineering without degrees. And this created a mindset. Problems are fixed, not outsourced. Now the suspense tightens again. What killed this system? Not better technology, but control, because when bricks, nails, and timber became regulated, when forests were owned, when materials had prices instead of proximity, self-built homes turned into illegal homes, and suddenly the knowledge that once kept families alive became primitive. And here's the uncomfortable reveal. Modern society didn't evolve away from peasant homes, it banned them, because dependency is easier to manage than independence. And now the final payoff hits hard, because eco-villages, off-grid homes, and sustainable architecture are quietly resurrecting the same techniques. Earth floors, straw insulation, passive heating, under new names, sold as innovation, when they are actually memory. And the last question I want to leave burning in your mind is this. If medieval peasants with no machines, no internet, no safety net, could build homes that lasted generations. What exactly have we gained by forgetting how, and what would happen if we remembered? Because the future might not need smarter buildings, it might need braver builders. Part 4 is the final layer, and this is where the story quietly turns into a warning, because by now you realize medieval peasant homes were not just structures, they were systems of memory, and once that memory faded, something fragile replaced it. So here's the hook you shouldn't ignore. When people forgot how to build, they also forgot how to recover, because disasters didn't change, only resilience did, and medieval peasants understood one brutal truth: everything breaks eventually, so build in a way that allows repair, not replacement. And this is where the twist hits, because their houses were designed to fail slowly, not suddenly. A crack appears before collapse, a leak before flooding, warning signs built into the design itself, while modern homes often fail all at once, silently. And now the emotional beat deepens, because peasants lived knowing their home's weaknesses. They respected weather, listened to seasons, adapted routines, while today we fight nature instead of reading it. And then comes the quiet reveal. These homes taught patience, because you couldn't rush mud to dry or straw to settle. Time was part of construction, and time created responsibility. Now fast forward to now, where speed is worshipped, houses rise in weeks, debts last decades, and people feel trapped inside walls they never touched, never understood. And here's the final twist that completes the circle. Medieval peasants didn't own land in paper, but they owned knowledge, and knowledge gave them dignity even in poverty, while modern humans often own paperwork but lack skill. And that imbalance creates fear. And now the last payoff lands, heavy and unavoidable. History didn't move forward in a straight line, it looped, and we are standing dangerously close to a moment where the old skills matter again. Climate pressure, resource limits, system failures, all pointing back to simplicity. And the final question I leave echoing is this: when the next crisis comes, will you wait for help, or will you know how to press mud with your feet, lift wood with your hands, and say, like a medieval peasant once did, Yahin mera gar hara hoga? Because that sentence was never about a house, it was about control over one's life. Part 5 closes the door softly but leaves your mind wide open, because now the story stops being about medieval peasants and starts being about you. And here's the hook that still matters. Every generation inherits either skills or excuses, and medieval peasants had no choice but skills because no one was coming to save them. And this is the final twist most people miss. Their homes didn't just protect bodies, they trained minds. Living in a self-built house constantly reminded you that survival is participatory, not passive, that comfort is earned daily, not delivered monthly, and this shaped people who were calm in crisis, practical under pressure, and creative when resources vanished. Now feel the emotional shift, because compare that to today, where a power cut creates panic, a supply delay creates rage, and silence feels like danger. And suddenly the primitive peasant looks emotionally richer than us. Now the suspense resolves into clarity. Knowledge didn't disappear accidentally, it was traded for convenience, and convenience slowly rewired confidence, until people stopped trusting their own hands. And here comes the final reveal. Simple but heavy medieval peasants were poor in money but wealthy in capability, while modern humans are rich in tools but fragile without systems. And that's the real cost of forgetting how to build. Not houses, but self-belief. So as this story ends, don't imagine mud walls and straw roofs as history. Imagine them as a reminder that the strongest shelter is not concrete or steel. It's knowing that if everything is taken away, you can still begin again from the ground beneath your feet. And that knowledge, once common, is now rare. And maybe that's why it matters more than ever. Part 6 is the echo that stays after the story ends, because now nothing new is being built. Something old is being remembered. And here's the hook that still pulls tight. The most dangerous moment in history is when people believe survival is automatic. Because medieval peasants never believed that lie. Every sunrise meant work, every sunset meant preparation, and their homes reflected that mindset, always slightly unfinished, always ready to change. And this is the quiet twist. Those houses were never monuments, they were conversations between humans and nature, adjusted season by season, year by year, and that flexibility is what made them last. Now the emotional beat deepens. Because when a child grew up watching walls repaired and roofs renewed, they didn't just learn building, they learned agency, the belief that problems respond to effort. And contrast that with today. where systems are invisible and solutions feel distant, creating a sense of helplessness even in comfort. And now the final reveal doesn't shout, it whispers. The future won't be saved by remembering medieval peasants. It will be saved by relearning what they practiced. Start small, use what's near, accept imperfection, and build with the expectation of change. Because use resilience isn't about strength, it's about adaptability. And that's the lesson hidden inside mud walls and straw roofs. So as this series closes, carry one image with you, not a castle, not a king, but a tired peasant pressing wet earth with bare feet, shaping shelter out of nothing. Not because it was romantic, but because it was necessary. And ask yourself this final question, one that history already answered. If everything fell apart tomorrow, would you wait for permission, or would you begin